Hello, welcome to another episode of the Puzzle podcast where Isaac and I tackle difficult business questions, bringing our pragmatic first-hand experience with a lot of stuff. Today's question is it's a very timely question, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we take it. This is, how do large language models impact development projects? LLMs, correct me if I'm wrong, but ChatGPT is probably one of the most popular examples of that at the moment.
So it's straying off the beaten path we take on this podcast, but it's something that for sure impacts a lot of software developers. My experience from the product management side and the product development side is it can actually be very helpful not to use it as a source of knowledge, but as what the programmers call rubber ducking. Assuming that you know the limitations of what it is you're using and how this drifts over time. I'm sure, Bruno, you've read that ChatGPT 3.5, for example, it also drifts over time. The ChatGPT 3.5 of today is not the same as a year before, right? It changes how it answers. It is maybe a bit more circumspect, a bit more fluffy. Sometimes you have to prompt in a different way. But I do think that it's a useful instrument, provided that as with every instrument, you know how to use it. Have you ever used it for product development or product management work, or do you use it in that capacity?
I haven't used it at all, so I'm very curious about your perspective. In general, I'm quite a Luddite, even though I'm in innovation space. So I'm very curious, to hear your perspective, your use case, etc. Because I'm more in the camp of where maybe I'm too much of a control freak, but I like to know where things come from. So I only trust myself, exactly for the reasons you said. Because when I work with people that used it, then we ended up having to spend a lot more time actually verifying what they brought in. So I do see here a huge promise. For example, I've seen a friend of mine who's running a company. They used ChatGPT to sum up a huge amount of reports. But to me, it is, I perceived it as risky. How do you know? Like, you summed up all those reports. How do you know the veracity of them? And if you need to pay somebody else to double check all of them, why wasn't that person summarizing them in the first place? So I see the promise, but I myself haven't used it. So I'm very curious, about what you will share next.
So I would say there in my work, actually, I've used it quite a lot since it came out, since ChatGPT 3.5 came out. One use case I found from the early days is to help me write or adapt copy in a certain way, marketing copy, or to give it unstructured data and say, okay, here's how our supplier talks about a product. For example, we represent a rather large company at Tectra in Greece, and they have hundreds of thousands of SKUs, and we therefore have to understand hundreds of products. And the way, of course, as a manufacturer, they portray their products is always very technical. So if you go on the product side, it will be, has this kind of material, has this, so they mix features, benefits, specifications, and kind of implied requirements. To do the work of analyzing so many products, of course, ideally, I would do it by myself. But how are you going to scale this up? So one thing I found out ChatGPT is great at is with the right prompt. So here, ChatGPT copy-paste. Here's how our manufacturer talks about the product. Now, can you derive value propositions, formulate based on that data, formulated in this template, and there you give it the template of the value proposition canvas, right? So our product enables this and that to get this and that done instead of this. And because it does not rely on knowledge, but it relies on its pretty good or amazing by now the natural language processing capabilities, you get very nice starting points where you generate out of unstructured data things that you can start iterating on. So I would never trust it to say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what the value proposition of that product is based on this. But I do trust it to say, take this information, reformulate it into value propositions according to a template. And then I take this, and with my experienced eye, I say, yeah, it's good. So it's like treating it as somebody who is not amazingly experienced, but they're very good at writing. Very good. They're good enough at writing to get the process kickstarted. That's one thing. And I don't think,
if I'm understanding correctly, this example you shared, so you basically got it as a sort of what we would call like a junior research assistant, like take all this unstructured data, restructure it, and then parse it and put it in this specific template. So kind of you gave it very explicit instructions around a data that's accessible. First, you did not ask it to interpret it too much, but kind of restructure it. And then I guess it had to interpret in order to fill in the template, because it had to understand what is what. Yeah,
but it understands fantastically well many notions, and it certainly is. So what it does is it short circuit the time between 0 words on paper, so 0 ideas formulated in a certain way, and ideas somehow formulated. And you always need to, as you said, you need to spend time to evaluate it with a critical eye. You can never trust it because it very often is not factual. It doesn't matter if it's about marketing or it's about, I don't know, JavaScript. There you also get all kinds of nonsense sometimes. So you need to know enough about the topic to evaluate it. So you never take it at face value. But I'm pretty sure that many people, we have sometimes a difficulty to get started, to get from 0 to something, to 0.01. It is a big hurdle. So, here it is. Give me a starting point. For that, I find it very useful. Yep. And I don't see the risk being high. And I think as you said, it's a research assistant, or it's a super junior copywriter that doesn't necessarily know about the product, but knows enough, like we say encyclopedically, about the world around it, to give you something that kind of makes sense, or sometimes it makes a lot of sense. The other thing I found useful is learning in a way that is exploratory. For example, over the past, I've gotten into programming different things over the past 2.5 years, and since ChatGPT came out, I find it way easier to just overcome this feeling of dread I sometimes get, that I don't know this. Where do I even start? What is the proper query on Google? Which source should I trust? How should I go about finding information online, Stack Overflow, whatever? So I find it super useful to just express what I want to achieve and get the feedback of ChatGPT as a kind of soft guidance. Still might be wrong, but it points you in some generic direction. Or sometimes you can say, well, is this possible with this software system? Is this software architecture, does this make sense? Or you give it a software architecture idea you have, and you then say, criticize this, find all the flaws in the logic. So if you prompt correctly, and you do get something that is significantly better than what you will find with a Google search or with synthesis. So it helps you kickstart that learning. The one
it's very interesting what you mentioned. That big website for Stack Exchange.
Yeah, Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange,
Stack Overflow. Because what I'm thinking is, in terms of asking software development questions, is I would imagine also more pleasant to ask an LLM, because there is a stereotype for a reason. Like, for example, for interacting with software developers, I'm no software developer, but I use different software tools. And I always dread when I have to go to some of these tech forums to ask a question, then you're called stupid because you didn't do your homework and you don't know how to ask this. And you're not a developer. Well, I'm a developer. I'm a hobby developer, so you ought to become hobby developer so you can ask me this question, you peasant. So,
gatekeeping.
So I'm imagining that actually interacting with such a model can be much more pleasant experience, because it's not probably insulting you out of the gates, while it is scrubbing all these answers, trying to interpret all these answers. So I can see a use case there. It does seem less judgmental. I mean, just think about all the, not newsletters, but old school, mail exchanges where you send in and then Linus or whomever brutally insults you.
Yeah, that's a bit extreme though.
Yeah. So I can see that use case, and you get it immediately. So kind of it is happening in the moment.
Like, look, I think it's in the end what it does save you a lot of time. Where it does save you a lot of time, it cuts down on the lead time. And if you think about, you could get somebody's condescending response or telling you that you're looking for information that is phrased in the wrong way and so on, and you will also get it late when that person sees it and so on. Even in very helpful forums like Elixir Forum, which is one of the ones I frequent for help, fine, but you can get a way better than good enough answer from a ChatGPT or a self-hosted Llama 2 or self-hosted Wizard LLM. You can self-host those too now at a fraction of a time. And so the barrier to learning something, I think it's very low. But still, we opened this one with how does it change your product development? And I can tell you the one thing that I did which blew my mind was around a year ago, I was getting into the topic of property management, real estate property management, because of the software we are launching. And on Thursday, we're going public, brick.gr. And I had a hunch that the segmentation, yes, of course, you can segment based on roles like owner of property, manager of property, realtor. But among the target customers, I had a hunch that, you know what, the likelihood of using a property management software depends on the complexity of the portfolio you have to manage. So what I did was I started to put together a list of criteria. And I chatted with ChatGPT, said, it's okay, I'm running a startup. It has this customer segmentation that I'm thinking of doing. It's about this and it's about property management. And so I have a hunch that the purchasing decision for a software to help you do property management depends on the complexity of the portfolio. And the complexity of the portfolio, in my view, is driven by this, and that. What do you think about this? Is there anything I'm forgetting? And it comes back with some very nice feedback, not quantitative, not saying this is more important than the other one. Okay, help me come up with a list of potential factors that impact that objective function, the complexity of the portfolio. And it added more legal aspects. I said, okay, look, I'm based in Greece, I'm not the US, so legal aspects are not that important. Fine, let's drop this. So over time, even though so I had no knowledge at the time of property management, real estate, and so on, the LLM has some knowledge. It was a very useful iterative discussion on creating a set of factors that then I, with my own understanding, as I discussed with people, started to limit to the important ones. And what totally blew my mind, was when after this discussion, I asked ChatGPT, okay, so here are the 5 factors that I've decided upon for my segmentation, that this determines complexity. So give me examples of a low complexity customer, mid complexity, and high complexity. And that blew my mind. It created customer personas of different potential customers, where it recombined, it said basically the set points of the different factors in a kind of realistic way to say, well, this is George. George owns, 5 properties in downtown Athens. They're all co-located and this and that. And this is Maria. Maria owns multiple, multi-story houses across different locations. Some of them are leased for professional purposes. And it spanned the range with 3 personas. Is this the full truth? No, but it's certainly something that you can start to ideate on. So for those kind of tasks, anything that has to do with natural language, with some knowledge, if you prompt correctly, I find it can be immensely helpful. Assuming that you always qualify, that you talk with people, that you never take what it gives you as knowledge. You take it as a discussion impulse, which you can then take to the market and discuss. And the amazing thing is that, okay, of course, because actually it comes from you. That's why I say it's like rubber ducking. I didn't just say, ChatGPT, give me the segmentation that I should use for the startup, and then, oh, fantastic, let's go and segment. No, it was, here's what I think. What do you think? What am I forgetting? Okay, let's keep those. Okay, explain this, come up with more factors. And then I explore with the LLM and then I come up with something that I then co-generate, but I do steer a lot, and I take it to the market and I introduce this into a discussion, and I start to see that, hey, this actually makes sense. It is the complexity to a large part, and indeed, you do find those archetypes, not exactly the ones it gave you, but it blew my mind. That was it was probably around a year ago where I really became a huge fan for these use cases, for using it as a rubber ducky to just, rubber ducking, you talk to someone and you explain. And I don't think that any of my friends will have an interest to hear me out on segmentation of a property management software market. But ChatGPT is there. It costs nothing, the 3.5 at least. And it's good enough, way more than good enough for some cases, if you know how to prompt it at zero cost, at zero lead time. So I struggle to see how this is not going to impact the way people work, even though it's not a source of knowledge.
No, it sounds, at least the use case you shared, sounds like one of the good use cases, like thinking out loud. You're bringing your own data and asking for someone or something to offer a slightly different interpretation. You have to think through the questions and through the prompts. So it's kind of, there is this back and forth that increases the quality of the data that you also get back at every step. So I think all the cases that you shared in these conversations spotlight something that I believe one should have when using such tools and models, and that is you had a sort of understanding what you're looking for, and you had sufficient insight to understand if you're looking at total crap or something useful. And that I think is very, very critical. And this isn't just for LLMs. Like, I remember this in my engineering training. Like, professors used to fail students that would get wildly incorrect answers, not because they got calculated them wrongly, but because they put the temperature of water as above 700 centigrades, which would be impossible. It would be steam. Why are you putting this number? It's obvious. You should know this is the wrong number because
you should know better.
Water anymore. You failed. Bam. So to me, it's that way of thinking. Like, you have to be aware of, vaguely at least, of the outputs, the type of outputs, content, type of content you should be getting in order to derive the most usefulness from such tools.
You don't need to know enough to know that you're being lied to by the LLM. You need to know enough, in my experience, to get the hunch that you maybe are reading BS, that this stochastic parrot is generating. That is the minimum that you need to have. And then it can become a tool. So even though you say you're Luddite, I think it's worth exploring. It's fascinating what you can do with it. As every tool, if you use it appropriately. And in the end, we do come back to something that we have discussed a few times in this podcast. You need to know some things, you need to be open to exploring, and this can be an excellent tool. And it's not a matter of, it's going to take our jobs or anything. It's a tool. Use it, or I think you're missing out on something that is potentially big. And don't trust it. It's not going to change. The tool itself is not going to steal your job or make you useless. Your lack of wanting to learn more is going to, not a Luddite, but the resistance to learn more things through exploration is probably what's going to make anyone less useful going forward. And LLMs are a good antidote to that. If you are naturally curious, naturally intellectually curious, can be amazing.
I'm just looking at the time. We definitely went
absolutely
double over. But I do think it was great hearing about this from someone who used it in our context. And as always, to the listeners that might want to hear more about LLMs, use cases, etc., just share comments, whatever. We want to take them. What we appreciate is practical questions. We're happy to discuss philosophy, theories, etc. But how we imagine these conversations and what we try to bring to every episode is discussing practical questions in a practical way. With that being said, thank you for listening, and until next time.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.